I was her punching bag. Then her boyfriend started secretly hitting on me. She said he'd never lay an eye on me, so I showed everyone our messages and let the gossip spread. She was the last to know. For context, this happened about 5 years ago, but it's been weighing on me for a while, and I figured this community might as well be where I get this off my chest. Please remember that, like most people in this story, I was young, dumb, and working through a rough time in my life. Names changed and/or redacted for anonymity. This story also takes place over the course of years, so we'll be cutting ahead here and there. Long post ahead, but this is far and away the most dramatic arc of my life so far. TLDR. I worked with the coworker that made several transphobic remarks and jokes at my expense, as well as genuinely trying to get me fired for her mistakes. We stopped being friends, and one day her boyfriend, who also worked with us, tried to start up an affair. After she tells me he would never do something as low as sleep with someone like me, I tell the whole staff about everything and start playing with fire of her finding out because I want her to find out, but don't want to give her the satisfaction of me coming to her kindly. No one tells her, and it's not until he gets caught texting me in the middle of the night that she's clued in on what everyone else knew. I, at the time, 18 female, worked at a fast food establishment for years, during and after high school, which, as most people who work like jobs know, is rife with drama at all times. What didn't help was that everyone who lasted more than a year eventually would get their family members or partners hired on as well, so everyone constantly brought their home life with them. I was also a focus of drama and curiosity more often than I'd have liked due to being transgender. Admittedly, I do pass as a cis woman for the most part, and people often didn't know until someone inevitably gossiped about it. And then I would have another round of new hires asking generally invasive questions. I didn't care to disclose my being trans to everyone I meet, as it's not really relevant to working with me, but I do disclose if there's anything intimate or romantic ahead. It had occurred to me to look for a new job and hope that if I was more careful about who I disclosed that to, it wouldn't be as much of an issue, but it never worked out for me, so I just got used to it. Fast forward to my second year working there, and a new girl gets hired. We'll call her Gina, 19 female as well at the time. We were the same age, and we got along decently while I was helping to train her, and we made friends with the same people already, so it was natural that we'd hang out on the clock. After a few months of working together, our general manager moved on to a new career path, and we met our new GM who promoted Gina and I to trainers. This is where things started to go downhill between us. After a couple of weeks, the assistant manager, who I was pretty chummy with, pulled me into the office to tell me she had just gotten off the phone with a customer who complained about me. I was extremely confused, and after some back and forth, she decides to pull up the cameras from the day she's asking about. It turns out she had been told that I had gotten into an altercation with a customer in the drive-thru and cursed them out, which had never happened. When she pulled up the recording, who do we see but Gina herself, very obviously having a heated discussion with a customer. It looked like the customer had started with the attitude, and Gina was calm at first, but started returning the attitude after the back and forth. At some point, Gina even sticks her head through the window before pulling it back in and slamming the window shut. I was working that day, but was on break at the time it happened. When we rolled the cameras back further, I'm even seen clocking out and going to my car. The assistant manager apologized to me and told me that the customer had said the girl she had gotten into told her that her name was my name. I was already upset and more than hurt because I didn't expect Gina to potentially throw me under the bus like that. A few days later, I'm chatting with the person who was working nearby when the incident occurred, and I'm laughing about it a bit until I see my coworker's face. She tells me she didn't know if she should get involved, but Gina at the time had also been pitching her voice down, which I thought was weird until I realized why she did it. Pre-transition, my voice was slightly deeper than average and was a huge source of dysphoria for me. I worked hard on self-taught voice training, and it wasn't really an issue by the time I had met Gina. She was only doing it for the stereotype. Upon further prodding from me, my coworker also told me Gina had actually used this voice to do imitations when I wasn't in the room before. I don't know the full details of her impressions, but suffice to say I was annoyed, but figured I'd just let it go as I didn't want to risk making the new GM regret her decision. I avoided much conversation with Gina after that and tried to just keep things professional with her. About a year later, I've moved on for the most part, but Gina and I are still strictly coworkers. Keeping with tradition, Gina vouches for her best friend, Casey, 21 male I believe, and her boyfriend Aaron, 20 male. Casey and I start getting along really well, and things get very mildly flirty. Nothing major, just a wink or a passing comment, but this still sets Gina off. She pulls me aside one day and asks me to lay off Casey as he was uncomfortable with how predatory I was being. I was confused as usual considering I wasn't the one initiating the flirting generally and barely returned it as I was never sure who would potentially find out I'm trans and make things weird. It just didn't seem worth the hassle generally. I ask her what she means and she tells me that it slipped when they were talking and Casey apparently had no idea. I felt embarrassed as I try to avoid this exact situation and ask her to apologize to Casey for me. A week goes by and Casey and I don't have any shifts together as he's moving to night shift, but he comes in early one day as I'm getting ready to clock out and leave. I take the chance to apologize to him, but he seems caught off guard and tells me he wasn't upset about the flirting at all. He tells me that Gina brought it up by being trans in a DM while she was in the office saying, "You know you're flirting with a dude, right?" When he asked what she meant, she replied, "That's a trans just don't want you to get tricked." Let me tell you, I was floored at this point. I didn't know how to handle a situation like this, as most people were generally normal towards me. Even those who were curious and asked a lot of questions generally got over it, or I satisfied their curiosity enough that they generally didn't care. I still apologized to him and explained that I knew it wouldn't move beyond the casual flirting, why I hadn't, out and out, said I was trans. He assured me he wasn't upset and still thought I was cute, but he agreed it wasn't going anywhere further. We were cool with each other for the rest of his time there, but the flirting did stop. Ultimately, I decided that moving to night shift as well would be my best bet for avoiding Gina altogether, as she only could work afternoons. Things were quiet for a while, and I eventually got to know Aaron as he was a closer since he started. As it turns out, Aaron and I had already known each other. We were in the same class in elementary school, and he was one of my bullies. I was heavily bullied when I was young, primarily due to being very feminine, funny enough. He only ever joined in when others were bullying me. But when we were alone, he was actually somewhat nice. We bonded over video games and Pokemon cards as kids do. I even loaned him a game that I never saw again, but generally he would default back to joining his real friends in harassing me, and it took me a while to understand that he wasn't my friend, even when he was being nice to me in private. I gave him a hard time, but we were both adults now, and we joked about how he knew I was a girl before I did, before he genuinely apologized. I got to know the closing staff well after a while and enjoyed working nights as I've always been a night owl anyway. Another year passes, and it's now the age of everyone becoming an accountant on a certain website. I had decided to try and make a little extra money on the side like most people when the platform got big. I won't go into too much detail, but I had actually posted some content elsewhere to promote my page. While I didn't get a lot of subscribers, the post itself got pretty popular, think hundreds of thousands of views, and had apparently been shared around other sites. Somehow someone recognized me, and it was starting to get shared in circles closer and closer to me in real life. One day I was complaining about this to a coworker, Simone, 21, female, I was actually friends with outside of work. She had been dating the GM's son, 22, male at the time, and was just around the corner, which I wasn't aware of. I hadn't shared any specifics to find it with her, but apparently he managed to find the post, and I found out it was being shared with my coworkers. I walked into work and all the full managers were in the office, so I already knew this wasn't good. They explained to me what happened, and the GM's son was fired for the time being. He eventually got his job back after begging his mom. But not only had they all seen it, so had most of the staff. I was mortified and didn't work that day. Unfortunately, I was still having a hard time finding a new job already, so the next day, I didn't have a choice but to go in and face the music. It was a big scandal for a while, but eventually everyone calmed down, only making the occasional joke here and there, and I learned to just live with most of the people I see every day, having now seen my bowl. Simone had broken up with GM's son after the incident and told everyone how he had tried to convince her to do the nasty with her while watching the video, and when she refused, he decided to spread the post around to deflect and make it look like it was a big goof the whole time. I found out later that Gina was still sharing the post around, including pulling it up on her phone at work to show people so she didn't get in trouble for any messages. I only found out because someone went to the GM and she was written up, but somehow not fired. I still can't shake the feeling that if I weren't trans, this whole situation would have been handled differently, but with all the jokes, it was hard not to feel like a sideshow attraction. It was another weird time of my life, but I knew the risks when I started the page and just tried to keep moving forward. One day on my day off, I'm playing a video game and relaxing when my phone goes off. I see a chat bubble from Aaron, of all people, who I'd never communicated with outside of work, and only had him on social media out of courtesy. Ladies and gents, it was in fact an unsolicited D-pic followed by the message, "Oops, didn't mean to," and then, "But what do you think, though?" Here's where I'm most likely the bad guy. I did think about going to Gina and telling her, because I know what it's like to be cheated on and didn't want her getting the idea that I had initiated this. I took some time to think it over, as I wasn't a fan of her considering our history so far anyway. I obviously ran into Erin at work long before I would see her, as we still worked opposing shifts and she was usually gone by the time I clocked in. Erin came to me and tried to assure me that they had broken up and he was just feeling lonely. And Gina had also showed him the aforementioned post, and while she was making jokes, he memorized the page. I told him nothing was going to happen, and while I was flattered, I wasn't a huge fan of people I know seeing it already. We both agreed to drop it, as I was in a relationship and not a cheater, and I didn't fully believe they weren't going to get back together if he was even being honest about the breakup. It wasn't long before Erin broke his promise and kept flirting with me. I admit I should have shot it down harder, but the night shift was feeling longer by the day, and this was something to keep me entertained, and it was a new feeling to be chased like this by someone. I held firm and didn't engage with much, aside from a nickname for him. Everyone at work called him Rabbit, because he was usually the one who had to run and get things, so I would jokingly call him Bunny whenever I needed something. Not the most creative, but I wasn't really trying. I wasn't there for this. But apparently, while looking through the cameras, one of the managers who we'll call Lisa, 40, female, sees Erin and I acting friendly enough and she hears me call him Bunny. She informs Gina of this, and when I go to clock in, Gina has been waiting for me, slamming her hand over the thumbprint reader before I even register she's there. I look up at her face and she's already beet red. We go back to the office and before the door is even closed, she unloads on me. "So, who the heck is Bunny? You don't need to be such a S-word. You already ran Casey off, why do you need to creep on people's boyfriends too?" I tried to open my mouth to apologize, but after she brought up Casey, who had left for a new job months ago, I remembered all the crap she tried to pull and just shut down for a bit, while she continued her rant about me being an attention seeker, and how it's my fault people have seen the post because I only posted it so the guys at work would see it, how it was pathetic that I wore makeup to work every day, etc., etc. By the time I was allowed to speak, I was done already, but I started to say, "Don't worry, I'm not trying to take your boyfriend, he's actually..." But before I can try to come clean, she cuts me off again. Don't worry, I'm not worried. Erin would never," she cut in very angrily. I should have still come out with it and told her, but the way she said it, I didn't think she meant he would never cheat, and the edge of that got me to keep my mouth shut on the matter for now. Quickly, after Simone comes to me and tells me Gina is telling everyone I'm a Y-word and a homewrecker trying to seduce her man. She had also finished her previous thought with others. Erin would never sleep with a trans, confirming my suspicions on what she meant by that statement. Folks, I realized to this point I was in the wrong for not having just come to her and dealing with it if she didn't believe me, but I didn't. At this point, I was sick of it. On one hand, I was very sympathetic and somewhat remorseful about what I was doing to Gina, even if I owed her nothing, and would have fully accepted I was being a bad guy if it was just about her partner trying to convince me into an affair. But on the other hand, she had once again made it about belittling me for being transgender. I decided to pull up the messages from that day, having already deleted the D-pic on my side at least, and showed Simone. I mostly wanted her to know that I hadn't initiated anything, and my passive responses to his flirting, while not great on my part, were nothing in comparison to stuff he was saying to me. I assumed Simone would go back to Gina and tell her, so I waited for the fallout. The next day nothing happened, and the next still radio silent. After a while, I returned to debating settling this once and for all. But in my early 20s destructive brain, I decided none of this was worth it, and if I was ever going to start fresh, I needed to burn my bridges here and go full nuclear. I started flirting back with Bunny, and when someone would ask about it, I'd tell them the whole truth about the situation, even showing them the texts. Eventually, the gossip got shared all around the store, even to half the morning shift workers and all the managers. To my surprise, no one seemed to be that mad at me. By this point, I really didn't care about Erin, only really seeing him as a pawn in this new game, and not that interested in someone who would throw away their relationship like he was trying so hard to do. After a while, it finally got back to him that I blabbed, and he was now scared Gina would find out any day, furthering my suspicion that they had never broken up at all, and he was using me as much as I was using him. People were coming up to me and asking if it had happened yet, also excited for what may happen if Gina is let in on the big joke that everyone else is now a part of, as none of them came to her in all that time I still worked there. I start laying it on thick on multiple occasions when Gina and Aaron were both in the room. I started joking about how annoying it is to get an unsolicited D-pic from a guy who says, "Oops, didn't mean to." Aaron's face turns bright red, but Gina starts laughing along, not noticing how her boyfriend reacts whenever I make a similar joke. I start talking about this girl I know, whose boyfriend is hitting me up when Gina is in the room, and she laughs along like it's just another kiki. After a while, I wonder if I'm taking it too far, but Gina has made enough enemies in the building that others start to find the situation that much funnier when I point out that everyone has had the chance to say something, but no one likes her enough to. I admit this was cruel, but at the time, all my petty rage toward her made it hard to feel that bad. Aaron had realized my game and started to distance himself, which was more than fine with me, as I did honestly want to stop being the other woman as soon as the novelty of being pursued by a guy wore off. Eventually, I quit that job for a number of reasons that would make this post unreadable due to monetization, but suffice to say, it was a long time coming. A couple months after I had left, Aaron hits me up again at 2 a.m., asking if I still thought about him. I told him I thought about the situation and honestly regretted my behavior and wasn't interested in starting anything up. He tried one more time, but I ignored the message. 30 minutes later, I'm getting spammed with messages from Gina, who had apparently found Aaron texting someone so late and looked through his phone. Mostly, she just calls me a S-word repeatedly before telling me I could have him. At this point, I finally say to heck with it and send her all my screenshots of Aaron consistently being the one to hit me up, with the odd exception of me sending Aaron a picture of his uncleanness workstation to let him know to do better next time. I also informed her of everyone at the store knowing everything, including the mutual friends she would confide in and run back to me. I finished it off with a final message. Don't worry though, Aaron would never. And with that, I blocked her on everything. I've tried to move on, never having done something like this again. I have had boyfriends try to pull things, and I always tell their girlfriend whether I'm friends with them or not, but this situation still keeps me up some nights. When I tell people close to me about it, they always side with me and tell me she deserved it, but I still feel remorse. I'm mostly looking for unbiased opinions, so I can finally figure out not only am I a bad guy for this, but am I the bad guy for this? Story 2, my now ex-boyfriend cheated on me with my best friend. Hello everyone. I apologize for any spelling or grammar mistakes, as English is not my first language, but I'll do my best to explain everything clearly. Sorry, this will be quite long. So, I've been a casual Reddit browser for a while. A couple of weeks ago, I was thinking it was kind of a pity that I didn't have any drama worth sharing in my life. Well, beware of what you wish for, I guess. To give some context, I, 30 female, have a close group of 3 friends. Let's call them Emily, Carla, and Jean. We've been friends since elementary school. We were born in the same small town and went through school and college together. Each of us has had her own family struggles, and those experiences bonded us, or so I thought. They were my people, the ones I could always go to when I felt overwhelmed with life. Even when our career choices brought us apart, I have a job that requires me to live abroad for months, sometimes years. We were always there for each other. 10 years ago, I met Emily's best friend, Peter, 30 male. We went out in the same group of friends and slowly grew closer. When I noticed I was developing feelings for him, I addressed the situation with Emily, who was in a relationship at the time. She seemed somewhat distressed about the topic, but didn't bring up any real concerns, and ended up saying that it was fine as long as we didn't put her in the middle of it. So Peter and I started officially going out. It was my first relationship, and I'll admit I was blind to a lot of red flags, but that's another story. We were together for 3 years, and for the last part, it was a long-distance relationship due to my work. We broke up during that period, but then resumed contact 4 months before my return. We decided that we would give it a try again once I was back, as we were still in love with each other, or at least I was. We eventually broke up, and I was devastated again, not the healthiest relationship on the planet, but we decided to stay friends. I had feelings for him for a couple of years after that, but I never let those stray me from my decision. Emily and Jean helped me a lot through the grieving process and gave me strength to rebuild my shattered self-esteem. Now fast forward to last week. I was on a video call with Emily, as I am living abroad again now, and I happened to ask about Peter. It was nothing deep, I was just curious. Well, as soon as she heard his name, she had a full-blown panic attack. She started hyperventilating, said that they were not in contact anymore and that she despised him with all her heart. Then she blurted out half sentences about things that happened, but she didn't have the courage to tell me because she was too scared of my reaction. Being the idiot that I am, I couldn't bear to see her in pain, so I told her it was fine, she didn't have to tell me anything, and we could discuss the situation when she was ready to do so. I added that I would always be there for her and ended the call. Then I started connecting the dots, and guess what? I had the panic attack. Memories came flooding in small things, details about her reactions in the past, her reluctance to discuss her relationship with Peter, a kind of shadow I had perceived in our friendship for a while now. I had attributed it to my control freak tendencies and my being overprotective of her. I had literally gaslit myself for years, convincing myself that I must have been in the wrong every time my instincts told me something was off. She couldn't have done something like that to me. They couldn't. Right? At this point, I was agonizing over my doubts, but still waited for a week because I knew she had an important event coming up, and I didn't want to jeopardize her performance again. If you look for doormat in a dictionary, you'll find my face. I finally sent her a message saying that we needed to talk. She was already on the verge of tears at the beginning of the call. She told me that she had always been in love with Peter, feelings unlike anything she had ever experienced before or after him. They had an intimate and emotional relationship at two different points, once when I was coming back from my time abroad the first time, and then 2 years ago. She kept both of them a secret from me. Even though I already knew by then, it still hurt so bad. I told her that she had shattered me. I could somehow accept that they had a thing 2 years ago because by then, Peter and I were definitely over, but before that, she knew that I was fighting tooth and nail to save my relationship with him. When everything was over, I went to her, I cried in her arms, and she looked at me knowing fully what she had done and how she may have contributed to the end of my first ever relationship, while also having a boyfriend herself, by the way. She was crying during the call, saying that she took full responsibility and would accept my rage and any insult I had for her. She said she would understand if I never spoke to her again. It seems that Peter betrayed both of us, telling her to wait while still sorting out his feelings for me. She told me that she's a different person now, that she would never do that again, that she had been blindly in love and was too scared to hurt me, knowing that I might take the pain out on myself. I ended the call by telling her that I needed time to process all of this and that I would try to save our friendship, but I wasn't sure about the future. So I guess I'm here to ask for advice. I don't want to drag Jean and Carla into this yet. I want to spare them and Emily the pain of the fight until I've made a final decision. On one hand, the betrayal is hurting me so bad. She could have chosen to tell me so many times in the past, and she didn't. I was the one who comforted her when she was going through a rough patch with her job. I traveled to her place anytime I could, even when I had little money to spare, just to be with her while she was battling depression. I lent her money. I offered my home when she left her toxic boyfriend and accompanied her to her parents' house to tell them that their engagement was off. I fought to save our friendship after a traumatic event that left her momentarily apathetic and unable to connect with anyone. She had a difficult couple of years, but God, I was there every step of the way to catch her. And all the while, she knew what she had done and never mustered the courage to tell me. She chose to let me find out in the most cowardly way, throwing half sentences at me and leaving me to piece it all together while I am in a foreign country, have been taking medication for my mental health, and have little to no support. So much for caring about how I would react. On the other hand, Emily was my person. You know that scene when Christina tells Meredith she is her person? Yeah, I'm crying just typing this out. I lead a life in which I have very few key figures I have to reinvent myself and my roots every time I move. And it's not like she wasn't there for me in bad moments when I had fights with my family when I started therapy. She was there. I wonder, is it worth throwing everything away over something that happened in the past, over a chapter that is already closed when she herself has suffered and is clearly remorseful? Should I give it a try? Thank you again for reading. Update 1. Hello guys! First, a big warm thank you to everyone who reached out to me, both in the comments and in private. I really appreciate it. Some of you were wondering whether Jean and Carla knew about the situation while others suggested leaving them out of the drama. Well, they went ahead and threw themselves right into it. A few hours ago, I received a text from both of them that roughly translates to, We are sorry for what happened. We already knew about the connection between Peter and Emily we found out at different times 2 and 3 years ago. We would like to explain our reasons if you'll let us, but most importantly, we want to apologize for our silence. So yeah, they knew. It seems like they weren't part of the affair from the beginning. They just found out later and decided not to tell me. So, to everyone who suggested they might be involved, congratulations, you get a cookie. My therapist gets her mortgage paid by me for the next few years, and I get trust issues for the rest of my life. Yay! At this point, I just feel so numb. I don't even know what to think anymore. Update 2. Hello everyone, I have one final update on the situation. After this, I don't know if I'll be posting again since I have a lot to process right now, but I wanted to thank you all once again for your support and encouragement. It has really helped me put things into perspective. So I have definitely cut Peter off. I'm planning to send him an email letter explaining why this was actually a suggestion from my therapist to help me cope with the rage and disappointment. But after that, I'll never contact him again. As for my friends, Emily has tried to reach out, but I still haven't replied. I had a call with Jean a couple of days ago, and her reasoning for not telling me earlier was that it was Emily's secret and her decision to share it. She argued that by keeping it from me, she actually chose the most difficult path as she felt guilty all the time, but she still believes it was the right choice. My jaw dropped at her logic, but my therapist said that while my disappointment is understandable, her reasoning has a point too. She told me it wasn't Jean's responsibility in the first place. I don't know. Aren't friends supposed to be loyal to you when something like this happens? I get that Jean and Carla were put in a difficult position, but I mean, I was the one being cheated on. Anyway, I still need time to process everything and heal before I can make a final decision. Thank you again for reading, sending you good vibes and energy.